This video is about high inflation of 2022 and the coming hyperinflation of 2023. My name is Vitaly and this is my channel Bare Basics Economics, and today the biggest economic news is inflation. High inflation of 2022. So this video is about what is inflation. It's when you pay more to get less. Whether or not inflation will continue. It will. And what to expect in the future. Nothing good. First, let's see what the greatest intellectuals of today tell us about inflation. Senator Bernie Sanders says gas prices are at the highest level in 7 years, blah blah blah. The problem is not inflation. No, it is inflation. High prices are a textbook definition of inflation. Bernie Sanders continues, the problem is not inflation, the problem is corporate greed, collusion and profiteering. So, before, in the past, corporations were not greedy. In the past, corporations were kind and loving. It's only this year when suddenly corporations became greedy and profiteering.
Why should Americans not be concerned that injecting another $1.75 trillion or more would further raise inflation?
Because no economist out there is projecting that this will have a negative impact on inflation.
No! Every economist out there says that it will have a negative impact on inflation because high government spending is the cause of inflation.
I think ever since you've come into office, things are really looking up. Gas is up, rent is up, food is up, everything.
The higher the prices, the poorer the people, the funnier it is for Biden. So what is inflation? Let's read about it in this great textbook written by a Nobel Prize laureate. The inflation rate is the annual percent change in the official price index. You might ask what is a price index, and there is an answer. A price index is a normalized measure of the overall price level. So what is inflation? Inflation is when prices rise. When prices rise for most products. That's it, it's very simple. In the US, inflation is the highest in 40 years. In Canada, it's the highest in 30 years. And in Europe, it's the highest ever. I have an idea how to make inflation fun. Every time you hear in the news that inflation is this much, the highest in this many years, make it a drinking game because inflation will screw up all of us. Let's enjoy it. So these are the officially reported inflation rates. Do you believe them? When you go to a store and look at prices, do you say, hey, prices increased by 8.6%? Probably your experience is different. Probably your own inflation is different, higher, worse than the officially reported rates. Inflation is a percentage change in the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and the CPI is the cost of living. It's a cost of goods and services that an average family buys. So the official inflation rate is about the cost of consumption for an average family. Average is defined by bureaucrats, and if you are not the average, then your own inflation may be different, better or worse than the officially reported inflation rate. For example, let's say you're an American and you drive. Gasoline prices increased by 49%. And the bureaucrats believe that an average American spends only 4% of his income on gasoline. So if you drive and you spend more than 4% of your income on gasoline, then your own inflation is much worse. Your own inflation is much higher than the officially reported inflation. Inflation in gasoline prices is 49%. Inflation in meat and fish, 14%. And inflation in transport, insurance and repairs is 8%. And if you spend more than the average on these items, then your own inflation is worse. It's higher than the officially reported inflation. This was consumer inflation, inflation in consumer prices, prices that consumers like you and me pay. But there is a second inflation, producer inflation, inflation in producer prices, prices that businesses pay, corporations, factories, your employer pay. And the numbers for producer inflation are staggering. You probably want to say, Vitaly, why should I care? I'm a consumer, I am not a producer. Why should I care about producer price inflation? Well, you should care, because high prices that producers pay today will become high prices that consumers pay tomorrow. High producer prices show you where the consumer prices are going, and they are going up, up, and up. High inflation of 2022 will continue, and it will become an even higher inflation of 2023. There is something right in front of our eyes, but we don't see it. We pretend it doesn't exist. We don't talk about it. It's a US public debt, and right now the United States is inflating its debt away. And right now President Biden is printing money. He's printing dollars to pay off that debt. As the US prints dollars, the US dollar is worth less. US bonds are worth less. And the entire US public debt is worth less and less and less. That's bad news for international investors, but good news for the US economy. But this good news will come at a price, at a heavy price. Because right now the whole world can see that the US dollar is no longer a safe currency. US bonds are no longer a safe investment. And that will damage the US economy in the long run. But President Joe Biden doesn't think about the long run, obviously. Just look at him. Now, the best part of this video is what can you do to protect yourself against inflation. You can cry, you can pray, but here's advice from Bloomberg. Take the bus, don't buy in bulk, try lentils instead of meat, and nobody said this would be fun. Let me continue this great advice from Bloomberg. Wash your clothes when it rains, dry your clothes when it's sunny, or better yet, live in the woods, collect mushrooms, pick up berries, and hunt squirrels. And then there'll be no inflation for you. But seriously, how can you protect yourself against inflation? First, gold. Gold and silver are traditional protection against inflation. You can buy physical gold in a bank, or you can buy an ETF, exchange traded mutual fund, which is linked to gold. Next, bonds. But it has to be bonds adjusted for inflation, bonds protected from inflation, American Series I bonds, Canadian Real Return bonds, or French OATI bonds. These government bonds will give you income adjusted for inflation, income protected from inflation. Equities, stocks and mutual funds, because in the long run, stocks and mutual funds will keep up with inflation. Real estate, houses and condos are also a traditional way of protecting yourself against inflation. And I hate to say it, but maybe bitcoins, because bitcoins have a fixed supply, and when the supply of bitcoins is fixed, while the supply of US dollars is getting bigger, bitcoins might be a play against inflation. But please, I am begging you, buy bitcoins only if you already have a proper portfolio, a diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds and mutual funds. Only then you can gamble and buy bitcoins. My friends, that was my video on inflation. Yes, inflation is high. Yes, it will get worse. But if you follow economic advice, you should be okay. Be happy, be safe, and stay tuned for more videos.